While we're waiting, I just wanted to make a quick note for our attendees today. If you have any questions now or as we get started with the presentation, you should have a Q&A option in your menu bar. So your menu bar, if you're not familiar with Zoom, should either be at the top of your screen or at the bottom of your screen. If you want to go ahead and just put your comments in there, we can go ahead and queue those up for the Q&A session that it will be at the end of the presentation.
And Sophia, we are now live on YouTube, so you can go ahead.
All right, great, thank you. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Appreciate you guys being interested in our Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. And so looking forward to sharing the details of the program and the application process with you today, and also answering questions that you may have for your project or for your application moving forward. Before we begin, I just wanted to introduce the presenters today. My name is Sophia Carey. I am with the City of Chicago Department of Planning, and I help manage the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, the Small Grants Program or track, and we'll talk about that a little bit. I will let Mary and Ruben introduce themselves. Mary, you want to start us off?
Sure, thanks, Sophia. Hi, my name is Mary Kuhn. I work in the Department of Planning along with Sophia, Ruben, and Jim. Happy to be here today and hope we can help you with your application.
And I'm Ruben Waddy. I represent Summer Corps 504. We are the main program administrator for the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. I look forward to reviewing, helping review the applications today, and thank you for joining.
Great. And Jim should be here in a little bit. So when he joins us towards the end, we'll go ahead and let him talk a little bit about his perspective on this program. Jim is our Deputy Commissioner for the Bureau of Planning. So he helps us coordinate with the city planners and the community roundtable groups to really understand what are some good projects and some potential applicants that are out in the area, as well as understand what are the needs and the challenges that we would like to address through the NOF program. So, with that said, wanted to go ahead and share our vision for the program. The vision for the NOF program as a whole is to build strong and vibrant commercial corridors on the south, southwest, and west sides. And this is just a rendering that was created by some designers in the planning department. And as you can see, what we're looking for here are safe, welcoming communities where people can work, can live, and play. So whether that is in restaurants and coffee shops and patios or entertainment venues, companies that are bringing local jobs into the area. And of course, all of this is to support the residents in the area as well, so that they can have their needs met locally rather than having to travel to other parts of the city to get their groceries or to have fun places to go when they're relaxing and having fun on the weekends. Today's presentation is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to talk about what is the NOF program. We're going to talk about who is eligible. We're going to talk about the eligible expenses, the application process. We're going to talk a little bit about how the grantees are selected for the program. What are the requirements and restrictions? And last but not least, how are the payments processed? So as a grant, I'm sure everyone is interested in knowing how those dollars will finally reach you. So we'll talk about how that works and the kind of the specifics of that as well. On the right, you'll see this is a recent grant finalist from earlier this year. This is Free Street Theater. And we're excited to have them be part of our program. Okay. So really quickly, where does the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund come from? Unlike most financial incentive programs that are managed through the Department of Planning, this is a program that is not funded through local property taxes. The way this works is there are downtown projects that pay special fees into what we call the Neighborhood Opportunity Bonus, NOB. If you hear it, it is very similar to NOF, but NOB is the fund that the dollars get paid into, and that NOB fund then feeds 3 different programs. There's a local impact fund, which takes 10% of the funds that come in and translates that into improvements in terms of open space, streetscapes, and other infrastructure improvements. There is the citywide Adopt a Landmark Fund, which also receives about 10%, and that is really to support the maintenance of historically relevant landmarked buildings in the city. And then, of course, the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, which is our program, takes the majority of the funds at 80%. In terms of the history of the program, the program was launched in 2017. And when it was originally launched, it was really seen as just a financial tool. It was a way to move money from downtown projects into the neighborhoods. So the idea was that as downtown was booming and as more and more development projects were happening, some of the funds that were tied to those projects were then able to get transferred into the neighborhoods for more of the neighborhood community type projects. Last year, with the new administration, with Mayor Lori Lightfoot's administration, we did a overhaul of the program, and we gave it a little bit of a makeover. And we really focused on community engagement, and we relaunched the program with some new features to it, which we'll talk about later in the presentation. This year, we had 1 round of applications, which was in January and February. And then in March, we started our project selection. The finalists were announced in July, during the COVID pandemic. And then we also helped support the Together Now Fund. So that was the program that the mayor's office launched to help address property damage during the recent civil unrest and the just the environment surrounding the death of Mr. Floyd. In September, we are planning to do a second round, and so that is what we're going to talk about today. Currently, we have a total of 157 active projects, and for those 157 active and completed projects, we have about 49 million in committed grant funds. For the first round in this year, we received 325 applications, and out of the 325, 32 of those applicants were selected to become finalists, and we anticipate granting them a total of 5.4 million in grant funding. So as you can see here, this is a pretty competitive program, and our goal is to make sure that you understand what it takes to submit a strong, successful, competitive application and improve your chances of getting selected today. A little bit about the goals of the program. So how do we create inclusive and vibrant commercial corridors? We're looking to do this in 3 ways. One is we want to attract amenities into the area. So this is really looking at what are the things that residents have to leave their neighborhoods to experience or to acquire, and how can we bring those into the local community? So that's looking at outside and bringing it in. We also are looking at supporting commercial developments by local entrepreneurs. So this is really supporting kind of grounds up projects. So if an entrepreneur is living in one of the NOF areas and they're interested in starting their business where they live, how can we support them and ensure that their projects are successful and that their business can really provide for the needs of their neighbors. And finally, it's to provide resources for ongoing economic development initiatives. So things like hiring locally, supporting cultural assets so that neighborhood Residents have places that are clean and safe where they can just enjoy their time and relax with their neighbors, families, and friends. One of the things that we do is really work with our community stakeholders for program marketing and outreach to identify what projects have been in the works and maybe need just a little bit of funding to jumpstart and get the project going. And we also work with community partners to assist applicants with the application process. As I'm sure everyone can understand, because the city is part of the selection criteria, it is helpful to have partners that are in the neighborhoods really talking to potential applicants about the different parts of the application, the questions, how they might be able to answer those questions and really improve their application for selection. So let's talk a little bit about eligible applicants. In order to be an eligible applicant, you have to be a commercial property owner, or you have to be a tenant with a commercial lease. You can also be a nonprofit organization, but you have to provide some sort of commercial activity or service to the public. What is not covered are residential properties, and this includes home-based businesses or live workspaces. Manufacturing and industrial businesses and properties are also not permitted. So, for example, I'm just trying to think, like a metal fabrication company, for example, would be considered manufacturing and therefore not eligible. Also, social services organizations, so workforce development, schools and daycare centers are not eligible. And finally, churches and places of worship that do not have a commercial public service component. So if the primary use is a church or a place of worship, that would not be eligible for the NOF program. To give you kind of an idea of the diversity of applicants that we have had in the past, these are 5 existing projects that have all been completed to date. We have grocery stores, we have a dental office, we have art gallery and event space, we have coffee shops, and we even have bars and taverns. So this is, of course, not all of our grantees, but this just gives you an idea of the types of grantees and the types of projects that we will support. So let's talk about the types of projects. What can this grant be used to cover? First is if it's an existing business that would like to do an expansion or a renovation of their space. Second, if it's an existing business that wants to open up a new location. So this could be an additional location or they're moving to a new space. We also support startup businesses. So if there's a startup business that is ready to move into their first commercial space, those are also eligible projects for the program. And whether it's rehab or new construction. So if there is vacant property and an applicant is interested in building from the ground up, that is also covered for the NOF grant. Quick note about acquisition. We do have applicants and grantees that include acquisition as part of their project. Projects are eligible if they have acquisition involved, but the grant funds cannot be used for acquisition costs only. And the reason for this is really because this program is intended to invest in the development of property, not just to flip property. So if I own a building and I want to sell it to someone, and that person is going to maintain that property the way it is, this grant will not cover the sales or the purchase cost of that of the building. We do have 2 grant tracks. So today we're going to talk about the small grant track, which is for any project who is interested in getting a grant of up to $250,000. So that's $250,000 or less is considered a small grant. Doesn't mean that your project has to be as small, but that is really based on the amount of grant funds that you're looking to request. It is a competitive selection process, as I said, and these grantees for the small grants track are expected to complete their project within 2 years if they are selected. There is a second large grants track for anyone who is interested in grants that are greater than $250,000. A little bit about that program. It's a little different in that rather than a competitive selection process, they have a city council approval process. So all of those projects do have to go through city council review and get passed. And grantees also have to meet WMBE construction requiremements. So there is a redevelopment agreement that they have to sign that ensures that there's just additional requirements for completing and receiving that large sum of grant funds. For today's presentation, we are not going to cover the NOF large track, but what we will do is at the end of the presentation, there is an email address, and we would encourage anyone who has questions about the large grant track to email that email address to start the conversation and to get more information about that side of the NOF program. Okay, so a little bit about what NOF can pay for. So we've kind of talked about this in a couple of different ways now, but just to kind of reiterate that the funds here are really designed to support the renovation and the building, improving of buildings in the neighborhoods. So what is allowed? You can do minor site improvements if they are part of a larger eligible project. So if you want to put up some fencing, you want to put up some planters, great, as long as it's part of a bigger project. If it's just to buy some planters to put in front of your door, that is not something that will be permitted. Building acquisition, demolition, and environmental remediation for anything that's maybe working on vacant land, or maybe you've got asbestos in the building that needs to be remediated, that is all eligible. Security measures are eligible. Roofing, facade, mechanical system, repairs, replacements, those are all eligible. Architectural and engineering fees, HVAC, plumbing, and electrical are all things that can NOF grant funds can be used to pay for. In terms of what is not permitted, again, we want to reiterate that small minor projects are not going to be permitted. So if all you want to do is put a fresh coat of paint up in your storefront, that is going to be considered just a minor repair, and it is not what the NOF program is intended for. Construction or rehabilitation of residential units, or if it's a mixed use building, any portion of the building that is also residential is also not allowed. If you do have a project that is in a mixed use building and you're doing work that covers both the commercial portion of the building as well as the residential portion of the building, what we'll do is we will cover, we'll break it out in terms of percentage of cost and then cover just the commercial portion of it. If the building is already in violation and is perhaps in court due to building code violations, repairs or improvements to address that will not be allowed. However, if the building has some updates that are needed in addition to a larger project and is not in court proceedings, those are things that would be allowed. Operating expenses for businesses are not allowed, and neither is travel or lodging or hotel expenses. So what areas of the city can the NOF funds be used for? The first level of geography is what we call the qualified investment area. And if you look on the left here, this is just a kind of a thumbnail sketch of the areas of the city that are considered the NOF QIA. So again, QIA stands for the qualified investment area. All projects, regardless of whether it's going for the small grants or the large grants, have to be in the NOF QIA. These areas were actually determined based on US Census data. And we basically looked at the bottom 20% of all census tracts within the city and looked at vacancy rates, percent of individuals below the poverty line, percent of individuals on public assistance, unemployment, and educational attainment rates to determine which ones are part of the NOF program. So again, this really is to help support areas that have seen historical disinvestment and residents who have really seen their communities not receive the equitable support and resources that other parts of the city have seen. Also, just to do a quick plug, obviously the country is going through census right now. So if you haven't filled out your census form, it's really easy. Please do definitely complete your census so that we have updated information. And the next time we update our QIAs, we have accurate information for what's going on in the city neighborhoods. So plug for the census. Okay. So the next level outside of the qualified investment area are the eligible, priority, and invest Southwest corridors. Now this is specific for the small grants track. If you are interested in small grants, your project, so small grants again is anything that's less than 250,000, your project must be located on an eligible, priority, or invest Southwest corridor. These corridors provide kind of a focus on location and ensures that we have a collective impact in the corridors. So these areas, if you look on the map to the right, are areas where, for example, in the red and the priority areas, if you drive down the street, you might notice 4 or 5 or 6 projects that are either adjacent to each other, across the street from each other, but basically all clustered together so that we can really uplift whole blocks and corridors of the city. To verify whether a project is in one of these corridors, it's really easy. You start first with the NOF website. So the URL is just chicago.gov/NOF. And I think the next slide are just screenshots. So yes, so if you go to chicago.gov/NOF, on that very first page, if you scroll down, you'll see a little map here with the yellow NOF QIA, and right above it, there's a button that says search your address to see if your property qualifies. When you click on that, the next step will take you to a search bar where you can actually type in the address of your proposed project. Once you've typed it in and hit the search button, the program or the website will actually give a pop-up menu that says whether you're eligible or not. The key here is to pay attention and see that the address is correct, that you've entered that correctly. And then again, if you're eligible, that means you're in one of the corridors, you can proceed. If it says you're not eligible, there's 2 different things that could possibly happen. Either you're just completely out of the NOF QIA, in which case we'd have to look at other programs that you may be able to use, or you might just be in the QIA, but not in a corridor, which means if you're interested in exploring the large grant track, that is something that you would be able to do. And with that said, I'm going to turn things over to Ruben Wadi to talk about the application process.
Thank you, Sophia. Yeah, so again, thank you everybody for being here. And now I'm going to speak with you a little bit about the application process. So next slide, please. Thank you. So the application process is fairly straightforward, but there is a readiness assessment that's associated with it. The project readiness assessment is really to gauge your some baseline eligibility criteria for the application, which opens on Monday, September 14th, by the way. So mark that on your calendars, please. And again, it's a quick readiness assessment to gauge some baseline eligibility. It's a series of 8 multiple choice questions for the applicant. No materials are necessarily needed for it. And it's really to see if sufficient project planning has been completed or at least thought about for the project. And it also saves time for applicants who might not necessarily be ready to conduct a full-scale project at this time. But instead of just leaving them in the cold, it actually directs you to potential community partners that could help you bolster your application for the next time around, or just in general to help plan out your project for the future. But applicants that do demonstrate the proper readiness through this assessment are then given a code that they can use to apply for the program. And I want everybody to take note of that. It is important to note that the readiness assessment is not the full application. Once you complete the assessment and are deemed eligible, you are given a code, and that's what you use to apply for the program. I just wanted to make sure that you all took note of that. Next slide, please. So community organizations and other resources, like I mentioned in the other slide, those that do not have the proper readiness assessment are then given a list of community partners that could potentially help them with their application for the next go around, or just help them out with their project. So we do have a list of community organizations and or other resources online, not just for those that didn't get the proper assessment, meet the proper assessment criteria, but for those that are just in general applying. These community organizations and other resources have proven invaluable for applicants in the past towards the completion of a successful application. So I encourage you all to go to the website and look up those community organizations. You might see some familiar faces, you might see some new faces. I encourage you all to go ahead and take a look at that and see what resources are available to help you out with the application process. Next slide, please. So how do we apply? So again, I want to note that once you complete the readiness assessment, you're then given a code to apply for the program. So make sure to please keep note of that. So basically, once you do complete the readiness assessment, and if your application is ready indeed to apply, you are prompted to then click continue on the application code window, and that's where you'll be directed to the application. You're then going to be creating an account on submittable.com. It doesn't take that long. And then from there, you're going to begin your application. It's also important to note that you don't have to fill out the entirety of the application right then and there in one sitting. You can actually save it for later and come back to it at a later time, as long as it is by Friday, November 6th, 2020. So again, from September 14th to November 6th, that's the timeline window that you have to complete your application. During the application, you're going to be prompted to potentially upload supplemental files that could help bolster the context for the reviewers as they look through your applications. You can upload things like photos, you can upload construction estimates, design drawings, architectural drawings, engineering surveys, proof of site control in the form of a lease or a deed, maybe even a letter of intent, funding documentation, business plans. As long as the documentation is relevant towards your business and towards the project, I definitely encourage you to upload it. So definitely give that some thought before the application becomes open. And then of course, your application will be reviewed to ensure, we of course encourage you to review your application to make sure it is accurate and complete. Again, you have a lot of time to fill out the application. I encourage you to use all the time that you have available. Next slide, please. So how are grantees selected? So grantees are really selected. They're reviewed and evaluated in 4 key areas to determine the shovel readiness. We evaluate the project readiness, AKA how quickly can the applicant start the process? Do they have site control? Do they have a construction timeline in mind and plan? We'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, we just in general evaluate the readiness of it as in some very baseline criteria that determines if you are in control of the site and therefore you have the resources available to you to begin the project on your own timeline or on a reasonable timeline. Financial feasibility, we look at whether or not you have the funds for your portion of the program, your portion of the project. You can send, of course, proof of financing for it. This can be in the form of a bank statement or a letter from a lender or what have you, but we do look at financial feasibility to see if the proper finances are in place for the project. We look to see whether or not you have a construction plan from a general contractor, or maybe it's a construction plan that you thought of yourself to determine that you do indeed have a timeline in mind for completing the project. And that includes key milestones like groundbreaking, the grand opening, maybe a soft opening, maybe even have a draw schedule associated with that for when the contractor will get paid and associated with an association with certain milestones. So yeah, we look at whether or not you have that plan all down pat. And then, of course, we look at the catalytic impact of the project. Like Sophia mentioned earlier, we are trying to create, we do want to enhance economic development in vibrant commercial corridors. So we look at whether or not the project aligns with the values of the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. So as you're filling out your application, definitely keep those 4 things in mind. Yeah, because they're all equally important. Next slide, please. So there are 2 bonus options for the Building Community Wealth bonus. We have the base grant of 50% and then bonuses that can add an additional 25% or 50% on top of your base grant. So the first grant is the first bonus is going to be the local residency bonus. This is where for your business, if 50% or more of your owners have a permanent residence within the qualified investment area, aka the map that we showed earlier, the business and therefore the project will can qualify for the local residency bonus. If you're the sole owner of the business or the sole owner of the property and the business, and you live in a QIA, it's a little bit easier. But if you do indeed have multiple shareholders, we look to see we look to see the percentage of the shareholders that have their permanent address within a qualified investment area. That bonus is paid out throughout the life of the project. The second bonus is the local hiring bonus. This is a bonus that's applied after a project is complete. If you make hiring choices that involve people that have their permanent address within the qualified investment area. So unlike the local residency bonus, this bonus, as I mentioned, is paid out after the project is complete. So after you've already received your base grant for the project, that is when the local hiring actually kicks in. So again, this is when you, after the project is complete, you make new hires for those that have their permanent address within the qualified investment areas. And we verify this with check stubs that clearly show the address, or if you use a Cash App, we look at the ledger for the Cash App. You can indeed have both of these bonuses. If you can combine them, it's not just one or the other. So keep that in mind as you are applying. Next slide, please. So how much do grantees receive? So we're going to take a look at this chart here, and we're going to look at exactly how it is that the grant is paid out. And for the purposes of going through this, let's assume that the total project costs, which is the yellow bar that you see right there, represents $100,000. So let's say that this is a rehab project. Of course, that's $100,000. If you are seeking if you're just seeking the base grant, that is going to be 50% of eligible project costs. That's going to be both for rehab and for new construction. So if you're just seeking a base grant for total project costs worth $100,000, the grant would be $50,000 in this case. If you qualify for the Build Community Wealth bonus for the local residency, we then add 25% of eligible project costs to that base grant. So for a total project cost of $100,000, if you're seeking the local residency bonus and you do indeed are indeed eligible for it, we take the base grant of 50% or $50,000, and then we take the local residency bonus at 25% or $25,000, and we add those together. And that means your total grant would be $75,000. In order for you to receive those funds, you'll have to come up with your portion of the project, which if you do not qualify for any of the bonuses, it'll be 50%. If you do qualify for the local residency bonus, it'll be a 25% contribution or $25,000. So against a $75,000 grant, taking the local residency into bonus, we would be seeking a 25% contribution from the applicant. Towards the end, you see the bonus for local hiring, or the BCWB for local hiring. So this is another bonus that you can seek, and again, you can seek it along with local residency. If you make hiring choices from within the qualified investment area, aka the hires that you make have a permanent residency within the QIA, then we can pay out 25% of the project costs after the project is complete. So if we're looking at $100,000 total project costs and you apply for and are eligible for both bonuses, you'd be seeing a $50,000 base grant plus an additional $25,000 throughout the life of the project. Then once the project is complete and you qualify for the local hiring and you make the hiring requirements, that's when we pay out an additional $25,000 to help cover the rest of the project costs and ultimately make the total grant amount in that case 100%. But like I said, you can either seek the base grant only, seek either or of the bonuses, or seek both of the bonuses if you do qualify for both of them. And that's how paying out works. But I do want to add an important note there. No matter what, for the NOF small, regardless of the total project cost, the maximum award amount for small grants is going to be $250,000. That is the hard cap. The soft cap are the base grant and the two bonuses that I mentioned earlier. That's the soft cap. That's your eligible grant percentage, but the hard cap is $250,000. The grant cannot go higher than $250,000. I just want to make sure that that's clear. Next slide, please. So what can you expect as a grantee if you are selected for the program? So there are essentially 3 stages throughout the NOF process. The first stage would be the finalist. So if you're selected for the program, we give you about 3 to 6 months to complete the finalist stage. And this is where you're going to submit documentation for verification of the entity that you're applying as and your project scope, as well as certain other things, site control and stuff like that. We're going to be asking for that documentation to make everything is lined up for the actual project, which happens in the next phase, which is when you become an actual grantee for the program. So once you go through the finalist stage and a conditional award letter is issued that completely commits funding to the project on behalf of the city of Chicago, you become a grantee, and this is where the construction project will commence and be completed. So you'll have 12 to 18 months to do this after you become a finalist. And this is where you'll have to not only complete the project, but before then show proof of financing for the project, as well as come up with a construction timeline to make sure that everything is in place for a smooth project. And then after the project is complete and you do receive your final grant payout, or the contractor receives their final payment, you then become what's called an alumni for the program. And that's where essentially we maintain contact with you and have you complete a survey to see how the experience was and to see how the NOF benefited you. And then if you applied for the local hiring bonus and are eligible for it, this is also during the alumni stage. This is where you would be submitting for reimbursement on local hiring expenses. Next slide, please. So how are the grants paid? They're actually paid in a few ways during every stage that we have mentioned. So you can see some grant money as a finalist before you receive a conditional award letter. If you have incurred pre-development expenses, eligible pre-development expenses within a reasonable time period from the time that you were selected, about 6 months or so, you can submit for a reimbursement request for 75% of those pre-development expenses up to $25,000. Soft cap is 75%, hard cap is $25,000 for pre-development reimbursement expenses. And again, this is only for pre-development. If you are a finalist and you begin some of the construction for the project, we cannot reimburse you for it. So it's pertinent that if you are selected for the program and you are a finalist, that you do not actually begin the construction of the project itself. However, we do encourage you to do pre-construction planning, and that includes architectural and engineering fees, permit fees, maybe surveys and things of that nature. Depending on the pre-development expenses, we can reimburse for that when you're a finalist before you receive your conditional award letter. But I just want to make it clear during the finalist stage, no hard costs, only soft costs and eligible soft costs. For the grantee stage, this is where you're given a conditional award letter. And this is when you can actually begin the construction, and you can be reimbursed for your hard costs, or we can set up a construction escrow where we're paying the contractor for the hard costs. So during the grantee stage, this is where you'll be receiving a majority, if not all, of the grant financing. The grant either comes in the form of a reimbursement that's made to the grantee once they pay the contractor, or if the grantee only has their portion of the project costs and they demonstrate that, then we can set up a construction escrow and have that escrow pay the contractor. So in the escrow option, you don't have to have all the money up front. You don't have to have all the money up front and the contractor gets paid. But if it's the reimbursement or the rebate method, that's where the grantee is actually going to be receiving a check for the payments that they made to the contractor. And finally, as an alumni, as I alluded to earlier, if you apply for and qualify for the local hiring bonus, you can submit a reimbursement request for those local hires that you made after the project is complete, and then we will cut you a check for all the eligible local hiring wage expenses that you incurred during a specific time period, namely a year after the project is complete. Next slide, please. So how are grantees supported during the program? So during the program, we do have a few things that are available to grantees to make the project go by smoothly and efficiently. So the main thing that we have available is the technical assistance program. And we have lending coaches, architects, and construction managers, construction project managers on hand that can help grantees out with a variety of things. So lending coaches can help out with securing financing for the project in the form of loans. Architects can help out with pre-development, so architectural drawings, pulling permits, and maybe even a little bit of bid letting. And construction project managers can help out with bid letting specifically and finding architects and pulling permits. So these are things that historically have been challenges, not just for NOF grantees, but for really anybody doing a construction project. It could be a long process. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of departments to talk to. So these technical assistance providers can help steer grantees, and finalists, steer grantees and finalists in the right direction so that they can actually complete their project. We also do have a concierge program where city staff is going to be able to help out with support and answer questions regarding building permits, construction timeline, inspections, business licensing, registration with the Secretary of State, and things of that nature. We need to make sure that the applicant is always in compliance, legally speaking, from a business standpoint and from a construction standpoint. And again, it can be a little bit of a challenge knowing who to talk to whenever you do have a compliance concern. So we do have city staff that's available to help manage those particular aspects of the project. And then finally, business marketing. So we always want to recognize when a business has completed the NOF project. So we are always on hand to help out with social media, grand openings and soft openings, ribbon cuttings, and then even if you're doing groundbreaking, we could potentially be on hand for that after you submitted a construction timeline. So there's a number of ways that we can help to promote your business, help to promote your project, to showcase to the rest of Chicago that that the project has been complete. Next slide. So summary and next steps. So again, the NOF application period is from September 14th to November 6th of this year. I encourage you all to start thinking about your applications as soon as possible. And again, we have community partners. We have a list of them online that can help out with your application. The time really is now to get everything in order. So yeah, definitely think about that before the application start period comes around. The online application, and by the way, this application is online only. We will not be taking in hard copies of the application. You do have to submit your application online. And this is only for small grants at this time for a maximum grant amount of $250,000. All interested applicants have to complete the project readiness assessment that I mentioned earlier. And again, please, when you complete this assessment, If you are given a code, please make sure to continue your application after you receive that code. That isn't the full application. The application comes after the readiness assessment. So please keep that in mind. Applications, like I said, must be submitted online. No late or hard copy applications will be accepted, only online. You should start planning your projects now. You should start planning your applications now. You should start speaking to the, the community partners now. You can even reach out to myself as well if you have questions about the application. I do want to stress the time is now to start thinking about your application and how you can, how you can make it the best that it can be. Because this is, like Sophia said earlier, this is a very competitive grant process. We get hundreds of applications each time we do this, and we can only make so many selections. So please do everything that you can to plan for your application and to make it as competitive as possible, to make yourself stand out from the crowd, and also to give reviewers more context for the project. The more things that are available to reviewing your application, the more context the reviewers have as everybody is making decisions towards the finalist selection. And we encourage you to work with community partners in order to submit these strong and competitive applications. And as well, community partners are also on hand just to help out with different aspects of the project. So, and since the project is tied so intently to the application, you'll more likely be working on both of them at the same time. But also keep in mind, these community partners can help out with other things as well as it relates to your project. So just keep that in mind. You might not be utilizing them just for the application itself. You might find them to be helpful in other areas as well. That's why we are providing them to you as a resource. Next slide. So this is our contact information. Sophia and Mary are with the Department of Planning and Development at the City of Chicago. They are rock stars over there. And then myself, I am with Summer Corps. We're the program administrator. So if you have any questions about the program, feel free to reach out to me. My number is 312-360-3300. You can also contact me via the NOF@cityofchicago.org. Email address. This is for small grants. Again, if you're here for large grants, it's going to be a different email, but NOF@cityofchicago.org is for small. If you are interested in the NOF large program, you can contact that team at NOF-large@cityofchicago.org. So again, this is the contact information that you can use to reach out to myself, as well as the City of Chicago to get some assistance in your application. We won't be able to tell you what to put in your application, of course, but we can, of course, let you know about some basic things that you might want to consider as you submit your application. We can definitely help with some of the more basic things. Next slide, please. So with that said, we will take it. I'll give it back to Sophia, and we'll open up for questions. So thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to pass it on to Mary to start us off with the questions. For anyone who is wondering how to submit a question, again, just on the menu bar, which should be either at the top or the bottom of your screen, there is a little icon that says Q&A. If you click on it, you'll have the opportunity to send us a question. And Mary will kick us off with reading some of those out loud so we can answer them live.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Sophia. So we got some good questions. So I will go through those now. So question from Mustafa: if we have a few different buildings, can we apply for each building? So our rule for applications is one address per application. However, because the program is so competitive, it's very unlikely that you would be selected for more than one location. So I encourage you to think about which location, which business would be the strongest application, and focus your efforts on that location. But you are allowed to put in more than one. It just needs to be, one per address. Okay, next question. Teresa has waited patiently. Does the grant cover only physical costs, or can funds be earmarked and used for planned programming after the construction is complete? Great question. So the grant is only for, we say, hard and soft costs of the construction project. That's the nails and the labor of the contractors, and then also the engineers and the architects as part of the project. it cannot be used for operations. So unfortunately, it can't be used for programming. That is a good question.
I can interject just on, the only caveat there is the local hiring.
That's
So-
true. Yeah.
So,
Yep.
and anyone, you don't have to live in the area to qualify for that. You just have to be a business owner who's interested in hiring locally.
Yep. Good point, Sophia. Okay, next question from Teresa. Also, do FTEs have to live in the same area of the property, or can they reside in any QIA? Good question. So they don't have to live in the same neighborhood. Let's say that your business is in Inglewood and you want to hire someone from Austin. Both of those communities are in the QIA. So your employee could be living anywhere within the qualified investment area, and they would still, you would be eligible for the local hiring bonus if you hired them under the rules. Good question. Is there a minimum from Larvetta? Is there a minimum grant requirement? I think the question is amount, like the amount that you can ask for. I'm guessing that's the meaning of the question. So there is not a minimum. However, it's very unlikely if the application came in and you were requesting, let's say $1,000, like Sophia said, to put some planters in front of your building. It's unlikely that would be selected. It's not so much about the dollar amount and more about like, what is the impact to the community and, what are you trying to do? Because our goal is to be transformative for the corridor. So we are looking for projects that are going to be transformative and have a real impact, not more minor improvements to the property. Good question. Okay. Next question. Can we submit more than one grant proposal? Yes, you can, but it's probably better to focus on your strongest application. Can an applicant have a leased property? Yes. So you do need to show that you have site control. So that can be with a lease or a deed if you own the property. If you don't, lease would be ideal. If you don't have that, try to show whatever you can towards site control, like a letter of intent that you're working with the landlord and that you're in the process of leasing the space. Felicia, will we have to have purchased the property before the NOF program? So related to the last question, you don't have to purchase it. It could be a lease, but we are looking for site control that does help the feasibility of your project. So whatever you have for site control, try to show that in your application, and it will make it stronger if you do have a lease or a deed. Okay, Shondell, what is the difference between a business being in an eligible area and being in a priority area? And what makes an area have both? So Sophie, I don't know if you could flip back in the slides that show priority and eligible. So this was based on census data and concentration of businesses. So eligible areas, are just commercial corridors that are within the qualified investment area. And then the priority are the ones that were identified to have the most potential for economic development in that area. So for the selection process, the priority areas are going to have a little more weight. Eligible area is kind of like the baseline, and then a priority has a little bit more weight, and then Invest Southwest has another, another level above that of weight. Okay, Chantel, I am starting a nonprofit for underserved youth. Will it qualify? Okay, so a nonprofit that's a good question. So nonprofits are eligible for the NOF grant, but you must be doing commercial activity. So for example, if you are serving young people and you wanted to open a cafe to teach them, entrepreneurial skills or job skills, that type of thing, the cafe would qualify for the NOF program because it's a commercial activity, a store, those type retail, commercial, those types of things. But just as a nonprofit, serving young people would not qualify. Okay, so Gloria, would medical residential homes for special populations be an eligible project? So good question. So unfortunately, residential, any type of residential is not eligible for NOF. And additionally, social services are not eligible for NOF. So, you know, programs for seniors, daycares, social services, those types of things are not eligible. There has to be a retail or a commercial component. So we got some questions about the NOF large. If you can go to that last slide, Sophia, if you don't mind, with the contact information for NOF large. There you go. So she just put the contact information for NOF large. So please direct questions about NOF large to that team. And let's see, do the partners offer assistance in completing your application? If so, can you share? So for that, I will direct you to our website. And I think, it was on that, our website was on the last slide. Sorry, Sophia.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. So once you go to our website, you could also just Google Neighborhood Opportunity Fund and you'll get to our website. And then under community partners, there's a list there. And yes, they can assist with the application. Thank you, Sophia. Okay, wow, 4:30 on the dot, and I think we got through all the questions. Absolutely.
If anyone else has any other final questions, thank you guys all for joining us. If there are no other questions, we can go ahead and close out this webinar, and we'll look forward to seeing your application come September 14th. Oh, wait, hold on. Is there another one? Yep, that's it. All right, guys. Okay, I think we've answered all the questions. So thanks again. And again, we'll look forward to seeing your application.